Hey, what's up everyone? MGM here. This is session 2 in this mini-series of creating a beginner world and getting ready for your first adventure if you are a new GM. Now, if you're new here to the channel, thanks for stopping by and checking me out. I hope you get something out of what I'm trying to do here. Now, in the last session, we chose a game, we gathered some maps to give our world's Betrol a form, and we also answered some questions about the world to help us focus. We ended by beginning to think about our starting town that we named Deerhorn. It sounds like a lot, but honestly, most of that can be done within 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how much detail you really want to put in. And I recommend less is more here. If you want to cut down your time even less, I recommend getting a good module that already comes with the starter town. And as much as that might almost defeat what I'm trying to do here in these videos, it is a really great way to start GMing, and that's actually how I started GMing, is by running a module. So that's something I do recommend. However, I'm hoping to show you in this series that building a starter world doesn't have to take a ton of time and doesn't have to be too overly complicated, but still offers you the chance to add a little bit of your own creativity and spin into it. In this video, we will try to breathe a little life into this world. How, I hear you ask? Well, by adding a pantheon of gods for the world, defining who's in charge of the town and of the outside faction, adding some townsfolk into the mix here, and maybe even create a lurking and unique creature for our world. Now, before I go further, here's where I stop to say that I'm not paid for this and that everything you see on the table is something that I paid for myself. Once again, I'm featuring Knave 2nd Edition, Premium Edition in this case, and Forge Anniversary Edition. And these are the two games I had in mind when I was building this world. Your games might vary, but this is the foundation of what my world was built on. These games, or similar games to this, remember many OSR style games are very interchangeable and compatible. Also, these are excellent games that I recommend everybody check out. Anything that I may recommend as far as online tools during this video series is something that I just like to use and not something that I've been paid or otherwise compensated for. Also, I want to be clear with you guys about something I don't think I've ever explicitly said before. I'm not asking you to become my customer. Again, I don't get paid for this, and I'm not looking to get paid for this. I just really like tabletop games and enjoy making videos, because otherwise I just babble on and on to my group and they don't want to hear it all the time. So that's how this channel kind of became what it is. So I'm not asking you to be my customer. I don't want you to give me any money. That's something I want to make very clear right away. If anything, all I can really ask you to do is join in and join us. Maybe add some suggestions in the comments below or some tips and tricks so that more of the community can benefit from your experience and knowledge, especially from a different point of view than mine. And to also maybe encourage you to show support to the smaller and independent game publishers, much like the two that are on the table now and many of the other games I've done showcases on. But that being all said, let's continue with session 2 of our build. Now, like in the previous video, for this video, we're going to start off by zooming out and adjusting our focus to the world level. As that level goes, for the sake of this build, there's really only one question I need to answer out here, and that is, who is in charge of the world? We've decided that there's going to be a pantheon of gods. However, we haven't spelled that out yet, so this is the time we will answer that question with a little bit more definition, who they are exactly. Now, how did I go about doing this? Well, I leaned heavily into the Chaotic Shiny Pantheon generator to help me with this, and it made it very easy. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to create your own Pantheon if you don't want to. Many games come with a Pantheon built in. There are many Pantheons out there that you can just take for your own game, whether it's something you bought or something that's free and available out there. So if you don't want to put any time into creating a Pantheon, don't. Just grab something and use it. Once again, as long as you're not doing anything commercial, anything goes at your table. Now, I'll pop the list of the Pantheon on the screen here so you can see what I did. Now, to explain, mostly because I thought it'd be really boring to show you me clicking and copying and pasting and things like that, the way that I used the Chaotic Shiny generator was I would refresh the page Every time I came across a description of one of these gods in the pantheon they generated was one I liked, I copied and pasted it. I did that 4 times until I came out with the 4 that are here. After that, I erased some of the information I didn't want or didn't like. The stuff I didn't like, I rewrote. And I added a couple extra details here just to tie everything together and make it sound like it's all from the same world. There's lots of ways you can do that and lots of ways you can think of that. But that's just what I did. I copied and pasted, read, took out the stuff I didn't like, replaced it with stuff I did, or just left it out and called it good. The entire process, I think, took me less than 15 minutes, and it was very easy to do by using that generator. But again, I do admit the generator is doing the heavy lifting here. I'm just making tweaks to make it a little bit more unique and or to tie together into the world that I'm creating. And I recommend this as a great way to do a lot of things in the world. And yeah, maybe it's cheating by using generators and roll tables and things like that. But as far as I'm concerned, I think those are valuable tools for our hobby. And once more, if you're not trying to do something commercial, anything goes, and the creative inspiration from such roll tables and generators really, really do help you create some unique and fun games by taking a lot of the work out. I won't go into detail about the gods of this world, but we have 4. Koneth is the god of life and strength, and he's the main god who decapitated a foe eons ago, as we discussed in the first video. Cinder, the god of knowledge and truth. There's Kirian, the goddess of nature and healing. And Pulor, the goddess of destruction and chaos. Now, in this world, I wanted destruction and chaos to be seen as a natural and necessary thing. Hence, the goddess of that isn't evil per se. It's a necessary part of the life cycle of the world, and I really like that idea. I'm not trying to separate the gods out by being necessarily evil or good either. That is something that we'll develop over time or see if that's even a thing I use. I'm not a big fan of alignment, so I didn't add any of that stuff either. Feel free, if you want to take a screenshot here or just copy these gods. If you want to use this pantheon for your own, feel free to do it. In fact, I would love to hear, if you did that, how it turned out for your game. Now that we answer the question, who exactly are the gods or the people in charge of the world, we're going to zoom down to that regional level. Now, if you look at the map here that I'm putting on the screen, if you remember from last time where the town was, you'll notice I edited it so that I put the town in a better spot. I'm showing you that I did this mostly to point out that you can absolutely change your mind and rearrange things if you need to. Nothing is necessarily set in stone until the players cause those things to be solidified. It's a wonderful way to plan a world that's collaborative in building by giving it just a little bit of a starting point and a little bit of a shape, and then let everybody else kind of chip away as they all helped you sculpt the rest of the world. In this case, I took the town and moved it more north from where it was before, so it's closer to the forest. So the forest itself can play the role of the possibility of a threat, a place to shelter, and a place where people are going to make a lot of their living, since natural resources are a big part of this village. Now, one question I did want to ask about this region before I zoomed into the village and its immediate area is, what are some mysterious or dangerous places that might need to be explored or otherwise dealt with? Now, for that, what I really did is looked at the map. Now, my map did come with some pre-generated names of places, and I did just use those. There's a ton of ways to go about this. I'm just going about this the way I did. If you remember from session 1, we generated this regional map on the Perilous Shores app, which did give us a certain amount of things already filled in, so I just used that. I chose places that are relatively close by to the village that we're using as our starting point that may have potential to be something more or to be something adventurous. There isn't a whole lot much more to answer right now, and you really don't need to do much more than just note the areas and or give them a name, whether it's the final name or not. Now, if you take a look at the map here, the places I chose were to the north of the town. There's a place called the Copper Swamp, so I'm going to keep that in mind. To the west, there's this little mysterious island kind of in the middle of the lake. I'm going to keep that in mind. And to the east, there's this dark mountain range that almost surely has to hold some kind of ancient secrets that are better forgotten. Now, again, I'm not going to add any more detail right now. We might add a little bit in the next video, but for now, we're just going to keep these very simple and keep other places in the map untouched and open for further development later on. Now that I've talked a little bit more about the region, let's zoom back into the village and the immediate surrounding area. Now, when I say immediate surrounding area, I figure the forest, some of the field, and lake is immediately around. And that's the area I'm talking about. Now, some of the questions I wanted to at least answer a little bit are: who's in charge of the village? Who's in charge of that outside faction? And what is their main conflict with the people of the town? Who are some of the people of the village? What are some of the typical animals that might be found around the village and in that immediate area? And what is one unique wandering creature that might pose some kind of threat to the village and or the PCs? To do this, I leaned heavily on the Donjon D20 NPC creator and the fantasy name generator websites to aid me and really speeding up this process and making it very, very easy and fast. Now keep in mind the amount of NPCs that I put here, we may never use any of them. These are mostly for backup, that if we need to pull something during the game, we already have something to pull and use. Most of the time, if you have 10 NPCs planned out, the party might interact with 2 or 3 of them. And that's just how it usually goes. But it's always good to have extra. One of those 10 that you have on the side here might be used somewhere else. It's always just good to have a handful at least of NPCs that are somewhat generic that you could pull into any situation when it arises. And that's kind of the philosophy of what I did here. Now I'll put the notes on the screen here so that you could see them. We already defined what Deerhorn is. So here underneath Deerhorn, I have those 3 leaders of the village, complete with stats because the Donjon generator gives me those already. You might not need to use all of them. You might only need 2 or 3 of those stats they give, and that's fine. Take what you can use, throw away the rest, like I always tell you. The generator I use is also generous with giving some basic descriptions, and I use most of those. I did erase some sentences here and there. Like always, I always recommend you take something you like, tweak it a little bit to make it fit a little better, and that's exactly what I did here. I didn't really have to do much with the tweaking of the stats themselves. If anything, a few tweaks to the descriptions and maybe giving a couple people some different weapons is about as far as I got. As with everything, just use what you need. If that's too much information for you, cut it down even more. There's nothing wrong with that. All you really need is a light description, some basic stats of the things you think that NPC might need to do, and then that's about it. I always do recommend with NPCs, at least for the important ones, try to come up with a different voice for it if you can. That's just a little tip on the side as we move forward here. Now, I'm just showing you a small portion of the NPCs that I generated. These are just the generic NPCs. And as you can see, I have them in different roles here. There's a blacksmith, there's an alchemist, there's a baker. Any one of the descriptions or even the stats, if you want to, can be changed if you pull one of those to use in gameplay. They should always be considered pliable and flexible so you can mold it into what you want. That's why it's just nice to copy and paste a list of NPCs that were generated by a generator. So it's very easy to do that. And you might see that as my basic way of building worlds. I use generators, role tables, or other inspirations and just tweak it a little bit. And that's really all tabletop games are doing. Now, finally, I wanted to name the outside faction and their leaders. In this case, Giles is going to be the main leader, and Anflurg is the apprentice to Giles. What I decided is that they were both druid types, or at least naturalists or nature magic users, or whatever it is that you think druids are in your world. I consider them druids, very close to nature druids, and that they love nature, and they see the townsfolk and the village itself as foreigners and invaders in this land who are stripping resources and hurting the land, which doesn't make them very happy. So that is the main conflict, and we can use that to cause adventures, to cause problems and situations for the players to interact with. Finally, by using the fantasy name generator, I named the group the Order of the Abundant Moon, and I really like that. We can also use some of the NPCs we generated earlier to be other cult members, Or we could generate another 10 so we have cult members. How you want to do that is up to you. That's where I'm leaving all of this right now. I think that's a good starting point. Now, when I was asking the question, what are the basic or common animals around here? I just basically thought of typical animals that might make sense for that type of environment. So if you see here on the notes, you'll see some of the wild animals and the one wandering threat. Wild animals may include things like deer, moose, elk, fox, bears, rabbits, raccoons, owls, eagles, hawks, fish in the rivers, and always keep in mind that magical and mystical creatures can exist. And I think that's important. Now, this is just stuff I thought off of the top of my head because it was just stuff that made common sense. But something I want you to remember is that one or two otherwise normal creatures that we see in our world can easily be spiced up in a fantasy sense by changing things like its size, its color, its ability to speak, able to use magic, giving it extra appendages or eyes or mouths or things like that. You get it. You can change the physical appearance of things in small ways to make it seem a little bit more fantastic and give that world that little unique twist you're trying to give it. And this answers that question about the common creatures of the area. What about a unique creature? Now, you can easily choose here just to pick something out of a bestiary that you either have in the game or you bought separate. And there's nothing wrong with that. Choose something that you like that fits your tone. But in this case, I'm going to create one just so that you can see how homebrewing can work. Now, what I did here is I actually used the roll tables in the Knave 2nd Edition rule set to create a character. The stats I used also came from Knave 2nd Edition. Knave 2nd Edition has very similar OSR style stats for their creatures. So you can easily take this creature that I created and port it into your game. Just add or subtract the things that you need for your specific game. Here are the results. There are 8 categories that I was able to roll on in the Knave 2nd Edition roll table area for creatures. And I chose to use all 8. You can use just a couple or all of them or anything in between. That is fine for you. I liked using all 8, and I found the process to actually be not only fast, but quite fun. For animal, I rolled a beetle. For organ, I rolled exoskeleton. For monster traits, I rolled ethereal. For powers, it has insect control. Sense was sulfur. Sounds was squeaking. Tactics was break weapons. And the weakness was blood. I took all of these creative cues, combined them together to come up with a creature I called the Forest Wraith. Once again, thank you to Fantasy Name Generators for that name. A giant beetle whose ethereal shell allows it to phase into a mist for 1d4 rounds 2 times a day. It can call upon nearby insects to do its bidding 3 times per day. It squeaks when running and smells like sulfur and is weak to blood. Now, I'm not going to define the kind of blood it's weak to yet because I'm hoping to make that part of a later quest for the party that might adventure here. So it's always good to leave a few things ambiguous if you can. I came up with the 1d4 rounds and 2 times a day and 3 times a day because I was trying to make things as generic as possible, but give the creature something that it can use, but not letting it be overpowered to just use it indefinitely. There's lots of ways you can think of balancing that. For me, I just used the lowest numbers that I thought were reasonable. Now, you can get even more detailed into those if you want to, or get even less. Again, this is just where I felt it was really good. The stat block on the bottom there, right under the Forest Wraith description, that is literally the stat block from the Rust Monster in the Knave 2nd Edition book, only changing the fact that it has a 1d6 bite that can break weapons on a crit. And that's it. Now we have a very unique wandering creature that took me less than 10 minutes to put together by just using some roll tables, trying to use my imagination to connect all the dots, and going from there. Find yourself a good picture you can make a token out of, and I will put the one I chose for this one up on the screen, and then call it a monster. Now, of course, my tokens, as you see here, these are for virtual tabletops. You can take these, however, and print them out and put them on a flat map on a table if that's how you're playing your game. You can use this unique creature to build local stories and rumors so that your players might get interested. You might have it cause some commotion or other kind of situation the players have to deal with. Or it could even just be the target of a player hunt. You might even want to use it as some sort of recurring villain of some kind, or just a recurring problem. Having one unique creature in your world makes the world feel a bit more special, and might even spark your love for homebrewing creatures. But that's of course totally up to you. Alright my people, I think this is a good place to end this session. Stay tuned though, as in the next video I hope to put some finishing touches on the starting world, and maybe even get some ideas for the initial adventure. I hope that you're gaining something from the series and get encouraged to start GMing yourself. Now, if you're a subscriber, a big shout out to you. Last I checked, we're at 690, and that's still a number that amazes me, so thank you so much for listening and hanging out with me. I want to give a big shout out to you, oh viewer, as I can't thank you enough for finding and listening to me rant and maybe even listen to how I create a world. And finally, the biggest shout out to my wife. If you ever listen to this, I love you, I'm very proud of you, and I'm so glad that you're my partner. But everybody, whether creating a world from scratch, taking an already made one to use for your own, or something in between, don't forget that the whole reason you do it is to play for fun first. Thanks for watching, everybody.